Services Marketing, MKT 625, Lecture number 7.
Assalamu alaikum Khawateen Hazrat. This is Wasim Hassan, your course instructor for Services Marketing MKT 625 at the Virtual University of Pakistan. I welcome you to lecture number 7. Toward the end of the previous lecture number 6, I was talking about the 3 variables of the marketing mix of services. We had established toward the end of that lecture that we need to have 3 additional P's, meaning people, physical evidence, and processes, in order to complete the bag of mixed tools that we have at our disposal to carry out effective marketing for services. And I had barely started talking about the people factor, meaning one of the additional 3 P's when the lecture ended. And therefore, let's pick up the threads where I left in that particular lecture. People have got to be chosen very carefully because they are the ones who make up the setup of the organization. And you will recall that it is the setup which is woven around the purpose of the organization, and therefore it has to be a structure which is geared toward achievement of the goals and objectives of the corporation. People are extremely significant in services because they are the ones who offer solutions to customers' problems. They are the ones who come into contact with customers directly at the place of action where they sell their services. Therefore, the importance of their appearance and good behavior cannot be overly emphasized. These are the few points that I had talked about in that lecture. I also talked about customers' disinterest in trying to know who was behind production of the tangible goods that they were to buy in the marketplace. In other words, the distance between the place of production in terms of tangible goods and the place of the sales is immaterial as far as the customers are concerned. All they're concerned about the quality of the good that they buy. But they have certain references, they have certain cues because the product is tangible, it has such qualities, and therefore they can see one product from the other and go for the one which really has an appeal for them. In case of services, this is not the case because the services are rendered at the same place where production and the marketing take place. It is the concept of exchange medium versus the facilitating medium. In case of tangible goods, it is the exchange medium which characterizes the function of marketing because the product changes so many hands. And like I said, customers do not really care how many hands the product changed before it fell into the hands of customers. However, in case of services, they do care. And they're really concerned about who's the one delivering that service, what is his behavior, how courteous that person is, and how competent that person is in delivering the service. Is he really motivated enough? Is he really passionate enough? Does he have the qualities to convince the customer that the customer is buying the right service? Because that confidence really makes the customer very comfortable and makes him come back to you to buy your service all over again. So the facilitating exchange takes on an added importance in case of services, and it is performed with the help of people. And don't forget, the reason it takes on added importance because sales and operations are taking place at the point of action, which is just one. It is not that you have a factory here and the goods are being sold there in case of the tangible goods. That is the reason these people have to be chosen with a lot of care, and that is the reason that you have to weave the right structure around the purpose of the organization, because you would like to then train and develop these people in line with that particular purpose. And these are the people who have to have the kind of aptitude to be able to perform more functions than one when it comes to services. Customers, whether they walk into a bank or a health club or a courier service or anywhere else, they always walk into those facilities with certain expectations. And therefore, these people have to be the ones who can really come up to their expectations. They have to come up to the expectations of the customers by taking care of the challenge of inseparability and variability. Without having to go into the details of the 2 characteristics about which we have learned so far quite a bit, I would say that this is a great challenge which presents itself to service sellers. And therefore, they've got to see to it that there is no variability while they perform the services from time to time. At the same time, they've got to see to it that a salesperson in services also happens to be a good operations person and vice versa. Until the time people have that kind of a quality, they cannot really surmount the challenge of inseparability. There are the different kinds of people within organizations when it comes to enthusiasm and motivation. There are people who follow routines and procedures very assiduously, just according to the book, and perform their services very efficiently. And there also are people who are extremely motivated and like to walk an extra mile for the customer. It is here that management looks into the eyes of the challenge of maintaining a balance between standardization and motivation. So the question is, what do you do when you have employees who are too much motivated and really want to do something extra for the customer? Now, when they do something extra, they deviate from the standard procedures. So it is here that a balance has got to be maintained between the standardization process and a level of motivation which is higher than the average. This is just like an operator who takes the order in a fast food restaurant, telling his customer to take the seat because his tray will be delivered to him at the table. Now, this is an extra service. Although it is against the standard procedures and it is very much against the philosophy of the fast food, but this is one example of people walking an extra mile for the customers. So the balance between standardization and motivation in the first place has to be struck by the provider of the service himself or herself by doing an action of the sort I just explained. And this is something which relates to the one particular point in time. Maybe the restaurant is not overfilled with customers, and the service provider does have an opportunity of walking that extra mile. It is fine. But the problem really comes when people are too motivated and they want to exercise authority which is not vested into their positions. So that's where this balance has to be maintained. People are not just the providers, people also are customers. Like I talked about the definition, the informal definition of people in the previous lecture, that people are providers, they're customers, and they're also other customers. Meaning, if you happen to be a customer at a facility and you also see the other customers there, they're also people, and therefore they also affect the operations. The intelligent customers can play a very important role toward execution of services. Just take the example of the intelligent customers interacting with the management consultants or the architects. Their contributions can help those service sellers, meaning architects and consultants, come up with new quality benchmarks, because the customers might have talked about certain dimensions of the service which the service sellers might not have taken into consideration before they embarked upon selling that service or before they started interacting with the customer in terms of the design of the service and the possible outcome of the service. So the people play an important role. People in the form of customers could play a very important role when it comes to their dealings with service sellers like consultants and architects. Conversely, there can be customers who are not satisfied and disgruntled. They're also extremely important because they really create a scene at the point of action. And you can well imagine the awkwardness of the scene when somebody is not satisfied and starts yelling because he's not really satisfied with the service or has dissatisfaction due to one given reason or the other. So people as providers and customers are extremely important. People as providers are more significant because they are the ones who sell the service. And people as customers also are equally important because they are the ones who buy the service, and they are the ones who go through the process of the pre-purchase, and they are the ones who evaluate that service afterwards, and they are the ones whose word of mouth really matters, positive as well as negative. So this is just about people as one of the variables of the 3 additional P's of services marketing. With this, we get on to the next P, which is about physical evidence. Physical evidence basically is the physical environment where service is sold or delivered. It also could be any number of tangible indicators that facilitate toward selling or communication of a service. It could be colors, could be furniture, there could be signage, could be anything else. But the first and the foremost thing while you create the physical evidence is that you create a building. And you create that building because, building or an office or a physical facility, because this is the first thing that you have to tangibilize. Why do you tangibilize? Because the service you're selling is intangible. So the first thing to tangibilize the intangible is the creation of a physical facility. So that is one aspect of the tangible evidence. The second aspect, which is even more important, is the creation of the servicescape, the meaning that facility very much in line with the positioning of the service. And you will agree with me that the servicescape of a 5-star hotel is very much different from the servicescape of a post office. The hotel is plush, and it is luxurious, it is lavish. So it basically is the contrast between the one service being, or one servicescape being plush, lavish, and grand, versus something which has got to be very functional. Just about functional, which comes up to the essentials of the service. Meaning the functions have to be such, or the appearance has to be such that it reflects the complete functionality of the service that is rendered there. In other words, the post office. It should not be overdone, and it should not be inadequate. So the balance between the function and the way the servicescape looks like is extremely important. Let us talk about the post office servicescape in a little more detail. You will agree with me that a post office has to look quite very modern, given the fact that we are living in an age of very high technology. On the one hand, we have internet and computers and the very sophisticated support of technology when it comes to executing services. On the other hand, we're dealing with a service which is centuries old, the post office. And therefore, it also has to give the impression that it is up to date, it is very contemporary, and although it is a very basic service, and it may not be as fast as an email, but then at the same time, it has to look adequate in terms of the physical evidence it creates at the place of action. And you can create that convincing physical evidence by way of creating very attractive signage. You can get into the very efficient kind of customer handling, like the putting up of aisles and turnstile and so on and so forth. And you also can have some modern equipment sitting there, which is meant for stamping and doing things which are essential parts of the postal service. So in other words, what we're saying is creation of the servicescape, which is a very important aspect of the tangible evidence, is a function of so many details, the architectural details, including colors, furniture, signage, so on and so forth. The colors and signage of a courier service office, or for that matter, a travel agency, are very different from that of a bank. The bank is a very different kind of a service, and therefore the signage and the evidence are going to present themselves in a very different way than they present themselves in the case of a travel agency or a courier service. By the same token, let us talk about the example of a realtor, meaning a property brokerage house. the disposition of that particular office has got to be very much in line with positioning, because it reflects the essence of the positioning of the service that broker is selling. If the office is too grand, it might throw the customers into a state of doubt about the integrity of the broker. You know why? Because the customer might think there are some hidden costs and tricks when it comes to delivery of the service, and therefore they might go to somebody else. All I'm saying is that the disposition has got to be very much in line with positioning of the service, because it all stems from there. Physical evidence, therefore, we can say confidently, is created to elevate the comfort level of the customer. It not only elevates the comfort level, it is absolutely essential, because there's got to be a place where you sit and sell the service. And to be able to do that with the comfort level elevated, you have to reduce the risk. And you do reduce the risk which is there in terms of the pre-purchase process for services. And I think we all know by now that because of the intangibility of the service, it is quite a tricky process before somebody makes a decision to buy one particular service. I mean, there are a lot of risks. You do not know as customer how the service is going to be performed, and you cannot experience that until the time you have bought the service. And in order for the marketing managers to assure their customers that customers' risk stand diminished, they have to come up with a facility which is convincing. Convincing physical evidence reflects companies' professionalism and their commitment to the purpose of the organization. And that is something which really attracts people. It not only attracts people, but if you deliver the service correctly, there is every chance and possibility that you can retain those customers. So this is what physical evidence does. We can say that just like the good packaging provides very good cues in terms of assessing the quality of a tangible good, a good physical evidence provides cues to customers in terms of the quality of services. Although they cannot be extremely sure about the experience they will be getting from the service, but it does the trick, for attracting those customers. And in most of the cases, physical evidence comes up quite very much in line with the purpose and the delivery of the service. Let us now talk about the third additional P, which is the processes. Well, the processes basically are a collection of routines, procedures, and the flow of activities at the place of service. So in other words, all the mechanisms that come into play while you render the service is known as processes. And without the help of processes, of course, people are constrained to deliver that service. Processes support people, and processes also are part of the physical evidence, and these three P's come into interplay while you render that service. What is very important for a process is that it should be simple. It is upon customers to judge whether a process is complicated or simplified. The processes reflect the positioning of a service, and they have to reflect the positioning of a service in a way which could be owned by the customer. So in other words, if you have developed processes which are supposed to be simplified processes, customers should also take those as such. If customers think that the processes are complex and they're not simple, then you have not been successful in having your product properly positioned in the minds of the customers. The beauty of a process should be its focus on the customer. Focus reflects efficiency, and if a service is rendered efficiently, then the customer feels very confident that he has bought the right service. As a matter of fact, simple processes help businesses retain their customers and hence create brand loyalty. Brand loyal customers are the ones who come back to you over and over again and add to the revenues of the organization. Just take the example of an airline that offers online reservation. Now, there are so many different airlines offering online reservations nowadays, but if one happens to be the one offering simplified processes, then it is bound to create a competitive advantage for itself in comparison with others. Let us also talk about a cell phone company whose the processes are quite very simple in terms of allocating of a subscriber's number. This company again is bound to create a competitive advantage and hence the brand loyalty. A governmental organization issuing passports, for example, having complex and complicated systems may not be perceived by the people as people-friendly or for that matter customer-friendly if the procedures are cumbersome. By the same token, a consulate or an embassy in a country offering visas as a result of extremely complicated processes may not be considered as people-friendly because the people face a lot of difficulties while going through the process. I'm talking about people. So people, like I said, could be customers, and people could also be those who offer the service. If processes are complicated, it is not only difficult for customers to go through those processes because they may not have the patience of going through a complicated process. It also takes its toll in terms of efficiency while those the processes are being rendered because the service providers may not become extremely competent and savvy, you see, when it comes to offering complicated processes. So simplified processes are advantageous not only from the customer's point of view, but also from the standpoint of the service providers. The basic objective is to use procedures and processes as tools of efficiency and not complexity. I think this is how we can summarize the essence of the good processes. For the simple reason that customers can be won over, and they should be won over in an environment of no risk and no bottlenecks. Streamlining the delivery should take precedence over anything else. Now, having talked about the processes, we are done with the three additional variables of the marketing mix for services, and we shall now see how this complete the bag of mix comes to the support of marketing managers when they devise services as their products. It is pretty much clear by now that for services we have 7 P's and not 4 P's. The concept gets a lot of clarity from the basic principles of the classification and the services characteristics. The wide availability of the variables that we have at our disposal helps us to develop, support, and sustain a product. This is to be repeated. To develop a product, because you have to develop it according to the fulfillment dimensions of a certain need. Then you've got to support it in order to sustain it. So you have all these variables at your disposal to do all these things while you go through different phases of the product development, product support, and the product sustainability. And if you go through these phases effectively, you are working toward achievement of goals of a healthy enterprise. That is something which has to be underlined. The enterprise you're working for has to be healthy with the help of profitability that you generate. And the surest way of the generating profitability is that you develop the right products and you support them with the right strategies, and then you sustain those products. The whole area is extremely strategic, and it gets a lot of help from the variables that you have at your disposal, meaning the mixed bag of tools, and you have more variables than in case of tangible goods. You have 7 instead of 4, and you shape up your services with the help of these ones. Now the question is, why do you need these variables to shape your services? Well, like I said, you shape up your services by way of developing them, positioning them, pricing them, distributing them, and promoting them. And it goes without saying that all these areas are extremely strategic and make it mandatory on your part to come up with strategies which could provide you with a framework to be able to achieve those results which you need in order to have a healthy enterprise. Not all variables are used in an arithmetic way by applying certain formulas, as you are already aware. As a matter of fact, the number of variables that you need to get out of the 7 that you have at your disposal will be used in relation to the services that you are developing and in relation to the situations to which you are responding. So therefore, it can be a combination of different variables in varying degrees. There are certain operations where you need more people, and there are certain operations where you need more processes, and there are certain operations where the processes are extremely automated, and there are certain operations where processes are extremely manual. So in response to the requirements of a specific situation, you come up with a combination of variables that you need to develop a service. It is just like two cooks using two different recipes in order to come up with a cake which is very similar. By the same token, the marketing managers they should be good mixers of different variables and their further ingredients in order to come up with the right marketing strategies. And they do that with the help of their experience and logic. So we have identified these variables which are an extended mix in terms of the services marketing. And let me also tell you that these additional variables are not conclusive and absolute. What we can do is we can further break these variables into different components or ingredients and then come up with our strategies and sub-strategies. The reason I talk about sub-strategies is going to be clear with the help of this explanation. Your promotional strategy can be divided into so many different parts, advertising being the one. I'm talking about the promotional strategy in very generalized terms, and I'm not making a distinction between promotion and advertising here, and rather putting advertising as part of the overall promotional effort. So you can have an advertising strategy, you can have some incentives, you can have a PR exercise, and you can get into event management and so on and so forth. For all these divided ingredients of one particular strategy, which is about promotions, you have so many different sub-strategies, and the kind of variables and the further ingredients of those variables that you need, you are going to decide in relation to the specifics of the situation. The experts, therefore, have concluded that the services marketing has got to have 7 P's and not 4 P's. I'm trying to substantiate why is there a need for 7 P's and not 4, and 4 still remain kind of limited, whereas 7 provide us with the kind of flexibility to come up with the right marketing strategies that we need to have for services. And therefore, we can justify the reasons for this extended mix, so to say. And we can give certain arguments in favor of the extended mix, and those are that services happen to be intangible. And because of the intangibility, we have to have the people, we have to have processes and physical evidence. Another reason that we can give in favor of this extended mix is the difficulty involved in defining quality. Defining quality in terms of tangible goods is not as difficult as it is in terms of services, only because of the intangibility. And the maintaining benchmarks is difficult because we're dealing with people. And every time customers walk into a facility, it's going to be a different situation. And in order to eliminate the challenge of variability, we get into the difficulty of defining quality. Yet another reason which comes into the favor of this extended mix is the concept of physical distribution in terms of the tangible goods being very different from the one that we have for services. In terms of tangible goods, we have this exchange, the medium, or the exchange function. The people do not really care about how many hands the product change, whereas in case of services, it is the facilitating function which really matters, and the marketing and operations take place at the same place and time, and therefore we have to have these additional 3 P's. Even the promotional difference is evident from the factor of inseparability. You realize that people performing the same function at the same time of operations and marketing are in a position to promote the product then and there. This is not the case with tangible goods because of the separability of so many different functions. What is important is that we have to break down a service into different components, and those components are then have to be managed in a very strategic way by employing a different combination of variables that we have at our disposal. Now, when I talk about dividing a service into different components, that has to be explained in a few more words. Let me try to give you an example of the fast food, the direct delivery, which I talked about in the previous lecture as well. And that relates a restaurant which wants to get into delivering food at the houses or the offices of its customers, only because it wants to add some innovative features to its existing core product. Now, this restaurant has to look at the whole thing in a very strategic way and then employ a combination of variables to have the right strategic framework. The restaurant has two different options. The one is that the restaurant starts advertising and promoting that service by way of getting into some advertising campaign or by word of mouth. And the other opportunity which the restaurant has is to get into a strategy that relates very efficient operations. So in other words, the restaurant has the option of improving its efficiency and productivity when it comes to delivering the product, when it comes to exercising the operation. And maybe this is a better strategy instead of getting into the marketing stuff and ending up with spending a lot of money. I think the restaurant should go into exercising a strategy which works on the operation side. So this is what is meant by the dividing the one service into different components and then seeing which strategy could be the best strategy, and then what are the availables, what are the available variables that we have to employ. The restaurant might invest a lot of money into the marketing effort and yet not be able to deliver food very efficiently. Why? Because they may not have the right people. Even if they have the right people, maybe they're not motivated enough to deliver that service in a passionate way they are desired to be delivering. And maybe there is something wrong with their systems and the procedures. So it will be more realistic on part of the restaurant to look into the operations side and try to separate that in the context of strategic framework and then come up with a strategy which relates basically the operation side and not the marketing side. So this is what is meant by dividing the one overall operation or one overall function into different components so that we can bring into play the rightmost variables of the marketing mix. We have to be very clear where we need people and the kind of people we need, and what are the kind of training and development programs that we need to institute in order to make those people deliver our service the way we want it delivered. So we have seen how we can divide our service into different components and how the division of service into different components can have implications for the marketing program. Let us look further into the implications for marketing in relation to services. And I'm going to show you that with the help of two presentations which will explain marketing implications from that typical standpoint of inseparability. As you can see, the customer happens to be the focal point because even in traditional marketing, the focus has got to be on the customer. And it is for the customer that we bring into play such a lot of the marketing and other efforts. So as you can see, we have the marketing function, then we have operations, and the two functions are sitting apart from each other. They are working in very close coordination, no question about that, but they are not inseparable. They do not overlap. And same is the case with the human resources. We have human resources in case of marketing and also in case of operations. So what is happening is that this circle of marketing, operations, and human resources is revolving around the customer with focus on the customer in a very traditional way where functions are separate and there is no challenge of inseparability. But this is not the case in terms of services because now we have an extended mix and we have 7 variables instead of 4. And the reason we have 7, I've explained all that in detail. And because of those 7 variables, what we are doing is we are taking marketing of services in a different light. As a matter of fact, why do we have these seven variables coming into play? Because we have the functions of marketing, operations, and human resources all overlapped. Everything is being done at the same time and at the same place. And this is what you call inseparability. We still have focus on the customer. Because of this inseparability, the function of marketing calls for its integration into the areas of operations and HR. And that is why you see all these operations sitting at the same place and at the same point of this circle, because of the integration. Conversely, in traditional marketing, you do not see that kind of integration the way you see in case of services. And this can only be done with the help of the additional 3 P's. Let me give you one example of what I'm showing you with the help of this slide. Envision yourself as a hotel or a bank manager. Your concern on daily basis is to ensure that you maintain your sales, satisfy your customers, you run your operations very smoothly, and your employees remain productive and motivated to deliver the service. Can't you think of this kind of a situation for tangible goods? No. What is happening in this case is that you are taking care of so many different things. And all these things are being taken care of within the same facility, and these are being performed at the same time. A tangible good can be replaced at any point of the exchange medium if you find something wrong with that. And that signifies separation of functions in case of tangible goods. This is not the case with services. So with the help of this example, I've tried to explain to you guys how this inseparability comes into play and why do we need to have these extra variables to come up with the right strategic framework. So we can say with confidence that the failure of one function can lead to failure of other functions when it comes to dealing with services. The fact is that the failure of one is bound to translate into failure of others. And this basically is due to the factor of inseparability, because everything is happening at the same place and at the same time. So the one affects the other immediately. This is not the case with tangible goods, where you have to think about the whole thing in light of the exchange the medium. When you are dealing with services, it is a question of the facilitating medium, and it's all people all the time. And the variability and inseparability are the 2 challenges which people have to face and meet very successfully. If you have dissatisfied customers, they are bound to create scenes, and they will lead to a value which is not good for the company. In other words, the satisfied customers are going to offer the company with a good value. Value is a 2-way street. Like a company offers good value to its customers by offering a competitive price and very good quality of the service. Likewise, if customers are satisfied, they come back to the company over and over again, and they add to the revenues of the company, thereby adding value to the company. So you can well imagine the failure of one function leading to another, and then having its implications in terms of profitability and the value for the company. Do not forget that the value that you create for the company is the value for the shareholders. And every enterprise, basically being a commercial enterprise, is primarily concerned about the value for shareholders. And shareholders, the value is dependent upon the value which is created by customers. What happens is customers bring more customers, loyal customers, and they add to the stream of revenues which lead towards the good shareholders' value. So the importance of integration of marketing into other functions can be hardly emphasized. It is extremely important to look at the whole operation in an integrated manner, and we as managers have to see to it that there are no lapses on any one side, because that is bound to affect immediately the other sides, and the service is not going to be rendered the way it should be rendered. Retaining customers is the most important thing nowadays, and like I said, in order to generate value for the company and for the shareholders, it is important that the customers are retained so that they can come to us in a repetitive manner. We are living in an age of relationships. Gone are the days when services were kind of transaction oriented. You make one transaction, and that's the end of it. Today, we live in a very competitive environment, and we've got to develop relationships, and that takes us back to the concept of relationship marketing. And relationships can have to be nurtured not only with customers but also within the organization itself, so that interactively you can come up with internal marketing, which is just about the most effective form of marketing, and it works for the benefit not only of the company but also to the benefit of the customer. So in other words, what we're saying is keeping customers satisfied and their expectations met is the job of the marketing managers, and these marketing managers cannot be very effective until the time they have these additional 3 P's of the people: physical evidence and processes. And the objectives of relationship management also are fulfilled if these variables are available to the marketing managers of services. Let me now give you a recap of what we have learned so far during this lecture in particular, and in relation to the concepts that we have learned so far, because we are now getting on to another phase of learning, which is going to be about the expectations and the gaps which exist between the way the management delivers a service and the way a consumer or a customer evaluates that particular service. So let us take a summarized form of the lecture that I have delivered so far. It is extremely important to have the 3 additional variables of the marketing mix, and the complete bag of tools that marketing managers in these services areas have is of 7 tools and not of 4 ones. And these 7 are signified by the 3 additional P's, which are the people, physical evidence, and processes. And the reason we have these 3 additional P's stem from the characteristics of services and the classification levels of services. When we view our services in terms of that classification, we become convinced that we have to have a mixed bag of variables which is different from the ones we are used to in the traditional way. So in other words, we need 3 additional variables, and those are the ones which I talked about. Once we have those variables, we've got to understand the importance and sensitivities involved in working with those variables. And the lesson is that those variables are not applied in the same manner to all situations, meaning not all variables for all situations. As a matter of fact, we need to have a combination of those variables depending upon a particular service that we have developed or a particular situation to which we are responding. So in other words, these variables are applied in varying degrees and in varying levels. This is the smartness on the part of the marketing managers to gauge to what extent the combination of different variables is going to be employed when they respond to a particular marketing service. Now, the response is very strategic because it deals with so many different strategic areas. It deals with the area of product development, and it deals with the area of positioning the product. And when you position the product, naturally you've got to look into the concepts of segmentation and differentiation. It also deals with the area of pricing. You've got to accurately price your services, otherwise they might backfire. And you also deal with the area of the distribution and promotion. When we talk about distribution, we are talking about the growth strategies, so that you can see how the one particular strategy leads to another. And when you are dealing with the promotion strategy, you're also dealing with other strategies which are sub-strategies or associated strategies. And this brings us to the point of scrutiny, which is that we have to divide our service into so many different components and then deal with those components with the availability of these variables. And if we deal with these the components smartly by employing the level of the variables that is absolutely correct, not more, not less, then we are dealing with these components successfully, and we are adding value to the company. we are creating a healthy enterprise. And a healthy enterprise is the one in which you have, for which you have a great the base of customers. And that base of customers can be created only if you have satisfied customers. Now, satisfied customers is the key. Satisfied customers are the ones who get your service consistently of the same quality and with the kind of facilitation that they expect every time they walk into your facility. Your facility may be a bank or a courier service or any other service. The fact is they walk into your facility with certain expectations, and those expectations are to be met. And meeting those expectations stem from the right strategies with which you are shaping or you have shaped for your services. The value that the customers provide to you gets translated into shareholders' value, and this is where you must not lose sight of the commercial side of any enterprise. You are dealing with services, no question about that, but then at the same time, you're dealing with services because you want to generate profitability, a decent level of profitability in line with the vision and mission of the company. And the vision and the mission of the company are a function of the structure of the organization that you wove, you will recall, that you wove around the purpose and the objective of the organization. So getting back to the shareholders' value, when you have good shareholders' value, it is a testimony to the fact that you have a satisfied base of customers who are loyal customers and who are multiplying. And when they multiply, they add to this stream of revenue which is coming to the way of the company, and that makes you a profitable enterprise. And when all that is happening, you are successfully dealing with the three additional variables of the services marketing mix, which are people, physical evidence, and the right processes. And also another lesson that we have learned, that with the help of these additional variables, we get into relationship management more effectively, and relationship management being a very important facet of the three sides of the marketing that we learned in one of the previous lectures is extremely important, and that also owes to these three variables. So the importance of 7 and not 4 variables is something that we have learned today, and with this learning, I would like to call it a day, and thank you for the patience you've had toward listening to me, and I look forward to talking with you in the next lecture. Allah Hafiz until that time.